Yeah, look, it's great to get on the market, but I think you generally get the best result once the project is completed, when someone can walk through, feel, touch and feel the actual product.
You are listening to the Property Developer Podcast, your home for tips, ideas, and inspiration to help take your developing to the next level. Now, here's your host, Justin Getty.
Hello, and welcome to episode 112 of the show. How are you doing? I'm going very well. Been busy getting my house ready for sale as we are moving. I have to say, it's a very different experience getting your personal home ready for a sale rather than a project property. Definitely a far more emotional ride than selling trading stock. So cross your fingers for me for a good result in what is a fairly soft market at the moment. Speaking of soft markets, our sales of the remaining stock at my townhouse project have stalled over the past 6 weeks, which has been a little frustrating. Looks like buyers have put their hands in their pockets and are really apprehensive and afraid about committing to a sale. The property market really needs some interest rate relief to kickstart people's confidence, I think, and hopefully that is on the near horizon. On my other project, the demolition is about to start on the property, so clearing the house, outbuildings and vegetation. That should be completed in the next month or so, and then we can move on to getting the early civil works underway. Just before we get to today's guest, there's a few quick announcements. If you'd like a free copy of my book, Become a $1 Million Property Developer, then head to www.propertydeveloperpodcast.com and follow the link on the homepage. You can also take my free quiz to see how ready you might be to become a property developer at propertydevelopertraining.com/quiz. And finally, if you want to learn how to develop property safely and profitably, check out my signature property developer training and discover how you can realize that dream of becoming a successful property developer. Find out everything that is included in the course at www.propertydevelopertraining.com. All right, on to today's guest. Mark Gallo is a Sydney-based mortgage broker who is currently doing a duplex project in Victoria. Mark shares with us how and why he ended up doing a project interstate, the lessons he has learned about managing from a distance, and some finance tips for how to best position your project to obtain the best funding in the current lending markets. Okay, let's get straight to Mark and kick off by finding out his favourite food.
I'm a huge lover of seafood. So deep fried, raw, you know, in a soup, whatever method, I will eat it. I love my seafood.
Any particular type? Are you a prawns, a shellfish
Oh,
guy?
love prawns. Love prawns. Yeah. Which my wife's actually allergic, so I'm totally okay with that. More for me. I take it all.
I'm not sure whether I told the story once about my brother-in-law who once set himself a goal of eating 100 prawns at like a seafood buffet at a restaurant, and which he achieved, but he felt very,
Achieved it.
very, yeah, but he felt very sick afterwards, which is not
Yeah.
surprising.
There is such thing as too much of a good thing, I think.
Yeah, I think 100 oysters is way too much.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Even just talking about it's making
I
me a
know.
bit queasy.
Very slimy.
Well, it's great to have you on the show, Mark. So you're a member of my property developer training group. So it's nice to get you on to talk about your projects and how you're going. But before we get to that, give us a bit of a background about yourself and how you got into property. I know you're in finance, but give us a quick background about your journey to property.
Yeah, for sure. So I've worked in finance for over 15 years, predominantly focusing on residential home loan lending. Started a mortgage broking business around 8 years ago, after working for a bank for sort of nearly 10 years. And it's sort of that sort of sparked the love for property. And it really gave me an insight into what works and what doesn't. And I sort of noticed there were two key methods that people generally use in property to build wealth. One, which is very passive, which is kind of purchase the property, set and forget, enjoy the capital growth over time. maybe some cosmetic renovations, just to keep the property up to date. And then the other one that kind of really piqued my interest was the property development. So I saw people successfully deliver uh, property developments. They did it sort of seeing their journey because you sort of have clients long term over that time period, and they may have started in that sort of passive element where they may have acquired one, two, three houses, and then over time they sort of said, okay, what's next? I think sometimes people go to that sort of commercial property avenue, but then I also saw some people do the developments, and even seeing the idea of maybe on one of those houses that they had, it was a bit older. They sort of had the ability to, on that lot size, do something like a duplex on there. And I just saw some really, really excellent results. So it sort of sparked my interest. Then obviously got into the property development course that you put forward, and sort of I'm just a very curious person. So I really want to educate myself on what works, what doesn't, and sort of then take that next step into that sort of property development side of things.
And so, first project, give us a bit of a rundown on that.
Yeah, so it is a duplex site in Mornington. I actually acquired the site when it had a DA on there. I, hand on heart, wish I did your course before I acquired the site, because I would have realized that a DA is certainly a very important step in the process, but still a fair way away from getting things like the building permit. There's still a fair bit of water under the bridge till you get there. And then obviously, building permit, finding a builder, going to tender, all of that sort of stuff is a huge part of the process. And probably one of those small lessons, well, big lessons that I've learned from there is ultimately, time is money in that process. So because it's one of those, the first time that I've done it and learning through the process, obviously things have taken a fair bit longer. And all of that sort of contributes to things like holding costs, for example. So yeah, certainly if you see a property that's advertised with DA on it, it's yeah, it's great, but yeah, still a fair way from where that in the process that you want to sort of be following through as a property developer overall.
Yeah, it's interesting buying a site that already has permits. It can be really good, and you just have to be very careful and diligent when you're looking at the site and at the plans, just to make sure that it works. Because sometimes there's some people that have a strategy of just getting the permits and then selling the sites, and there's nothing wrong with that. But there may not be the level of care around the floor plans and the finishes and the materials that you would have if you were going to fully develop it yourself.
For sure, yeah.
And sometimes the designers can have a bit of a jolly if they know that it's going to be on sold before it's built. So they just sort of push the boat out and do all the things that they would love to do, make the rooms huge and all these kind of add bells and whistles that maybe you don't really need as a development project.
Yeah, and I think also sometimes you can get sucked into the idea of paying a premium because that DA is on there. So you sort of have to ask yourself, is there value in it, or is it better to find a raw site and start the project myself from the beginning where, I've found the site. I think I can get something on there. I've spoken to designers, but I've also spoken to real estate agents to understand what the end product looks like, as opposed to inheriting something sort of halfway through.
Yeah, look, I think you should only pay a premium for a permitted site if there's something special that's been achieved through planning. Otherwise, really, you should just be paying for the costs associated with getting that permit and maybe something a little bit on top of that for
Yeah.
whoever's selling, but certainly not some giant premium just because it's got a stamp on it.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And I think I mean, going back to the whole idea of property development, it's something that's always appealed to me about property development is there's so many stages to it where you can sort of there's both entry points and exit points with it. So in some respects, it's really great and flexible, but in other respects, you need to sort of make sure that you time and you know the advantages of the pros and cons of each particular stage that you can sort of inherit a project.
Very true. Now, you're based in Sydney, and Mornington, where your site is in Victoria, just sort of down the coast from Melbourne by about an hour
Mhm.
southeast. Uh, How did that come about?
Yeah, so working in finance, we have a lot of clients. We had a particular client that was looking to exit out of there, so they'd worked hard to get that DA. Talked me through the pains of going through VCAT, which I must admit, being from New South Wales, what I have learned is the Victoria planning controllers seem to be a lot more difficult. So to get to that stage was, I know, a bit of a pain point for him. He was looking for at that point in time an exit. It was around that COVID time, actually. So there was a lot, people had priorities and things to do. So then, yeah, we saw an opportunity to be able to sort of purchase that site off him. Um, but yeah, it's sort of going back to those differences in planning controls. Again, I'd call myself a novice with it, but up in New South Wales, something that I've seen quite regularly work for a lot of our clients is getting CDCs or complying development certificates. So just makes the process a little bit easier. It just seems that just a little bit more difficult in Victoria for whatever reason, which Justin, you might be able to speak to a little bit more.
Well, having been the victim of a VCAT hearing where I lost, and knowing a lot of other people, yes, VCAT is can be a bit of a lottery. But yeah, the frustrating part about planning in Victoria is just it can be so different from council to council and also from planner to planner. So depending on which planner you get or whichever way the wind is blowing politically in that area, it might even be that suburb in
Yeah.
a council's area that will impact how they view development applications. So yeah, it can be a bit frustrating, particularly when you have the Victorian government going on about how they're improving planning to increase supply, but I actually don't think there's really much tangibly for the bread and butter type residential property developments that most people are doing and that will deliver most of the new dwellings that are needed. So there's definitely heaps that could be done in Victoria to improve planning. Whether that's going to happen or not, I don't know. But there's still opportunities and places where you can get through planning relatively unscathed. And I think there's actually less applications in at a lot of councils around Melbourne and Victoria at the moment. So I think things are going through a bit quicker and maybe a little bit easier. But my experience is that it ebbs and flows like everything in development through the whole development cycle. You have the different components that you already mentioned. So you've got, your pre-planning and then post-planning, selling off the plan, construction, all those different phases. I find that over time, those sections of projects ebb and flow in terms of how easy or difficult they may be.
Mhm.
So sometimes going through planning will be a bit easier, or buying a site will be a bit easier, but
Yeah.
building might be hard, or selling off the plan might be hard. And then other times, selling off the plan is a bit easier, but finance is a bit harder to get. So
Yeah.
they're just the different components of projects can be easier and harder just depending on the cycle and a whole
Yeah.
range of factors that are beyond your control.
It's extremely multifaceted, yeah, property development for sure. Maybe on a side note, I must say that I think just looking at obviously being in the sort of market on a day-to-day basis, it seems like Victoria's got some really great opportunities down there. I'm not sure what you're finding on the ground, but when the market I'll describe as a little bit softer down there, I think that's a really great buying opportunity to get in with the view that once those developments are done, there could be some significant uplift. And yeah, so it's quite I'd describe it as quite an exciting market down there, personally.
Yes, I agree with you. I think there's a window open now that is going to start closing soon because I think prices have come off. Vendors are more flexible. I think we're at the peak of the interest rate cycle. I think they're going to start coming down very soon.
Mhm.
You've got still got increasing population. You've still got state government investing a lot in infrastructure. So everything's kind of building up to and there's a shortage of dwellings.
Yeah.
There hasn't been a lot being built over the last 12 months to 18 months. So there's going to be a big shortage coming through in about 6 to 12 to 18 months, I think,
Mhm.
which I think then is going to lead to quite an explosion in prices because there's just going to be a real shortage.
Yeah.
So if you're kind of getting in now, getting through planning and being ready to go, I think, yes, you can absolutely ride a wave that's coming.
Yeah, I think, and without a doubt, some of the core logic data, at this point in time are saying that both Brisbane and Perth have overtaken Melbourne. And I mean, yes, the data might point to that, but the reality is Melbourne is an international city. It has amazing infrastructure. For me, that is just bells ringing for opportunity, opportunity, opportunity. So yeah, timing is absolutely, I think, prime at this point in time.
Yes, I think I read the other day that Adelaide also took
Yeah.
over the media.
I've got to say, I think sometimes you've got to scratch the data a little bit. If you sort of think about it, I think the data is skewed because you've got Melbourne, which has a lot of high density residential units. So when they say the median dwelling value, the reality is Brisbane and Perth have more houses. And then therefore the high density units in Melbourne that are a little bit smaller, maybe, they're what kind of dragging down the median value a little bit. But still, I would still describe it as a softer market in Melbourne and softer market with a view that it's got a really great runway for added value, certainly in the sort of short to medium term.
Yeah, I was actually just about to make a comment along those lines that the median price can be a little bit misleading, but
Yeah.
I mean, it's as you say, it still points to a softer market. But yeah, Melbourne's a huge property market, and people love property in Melbourne. So
Yeah.
it's just a question of time when it'll bounce back. But yeah, it's a good time if you can to get in and secure property.
Mhm.
Um, and Mornington, I think, had a huge bounce in value coming out of COVID.
Yep.
So I think you've got one of your dwellings on the market, don't you? Or have you pre-sold or you haven't pre-sold? Tell us about that.
Look, it's on the market. The reality is, didn't need any pre-sales for finance. Um, I'm of the believer with these sort of duplex sites. Yeah, look, it's great to get on the market, but I think you generally get the best result once the project is completed, when someone can walk through, feel, touch and feel the actual product. Um, so I think, with the larger scale projects, you may need the pre-sales, especially from a finance perspective. But yeah, certainly on the market with the view that we sort of just putting the feelers out there, getting an idea on what people might be happy to pay. But again, certainly no rush because there hasn't been a requirement from a finance perspective.
So how's it been running the project from Sydney? Do you have to come down very often? What challenges have you faced or how have you found that?
Yeah, so really lucky. I've got a project manager down there that gives me updates on weekly basis, if not fortnightly basis at the very least. There are those challenges there. I have visited the site a few times, obviously. Um, but yeah, probably the one that you sort of find a little bit is when there can be friction between those in your team and you're just a little bit geographically separate from it. So there's been instances, for example, where the designer and the builder haven't seen eye to eye. The builders wanted a little bit more clarity over certain measurements, and then just not being there to sort of have a little bit more influence can be a little bit of a challenge. In saying that, I would say it's certainly not impossible to do. It's certainly with a lot of the people in our group, in our network that you've built here, Justin. I think if people see something that, for example, is regional that they want to sort of dip their toe in, or interstate, I still would say it's something that can be tackled just with those additional little challenges that you have.
Yes. Well, sometimes the distance can be a good thing as well because you don't get dragged into it. But that's interesting. So how did you go about choosing a builder then?
Mate, that was a real challenge. I found when I was going out to tender, Mornington is quite a pocket. It's quite an isolated pocket. So, trying to get a builder to sort of actually give me a quote on there, it was a bit challenging. I reached out to a fair few. Um, so and the ones that I did reach out to as well, a lot of them were either hesitant to give a quote or would want actually an upfront fee to be able to do the work to provide the quote, which I thought was quite interesting. Um, Yeah, I've got to admit, I think that's another learning. Sometimes you can only, in the end, I landed on one that was recommended to me, which I think is super critical. I think you want to work with a builder that has some sort of recommendation, and I think that's where, as a developer, you want to have a really strong network of people that you can lean on. Um, but equally, I'll describe the build process at this point in time as fairly slow for a variety of reasons. I think Justin, you could speak to that. There's sometimes in the construction industry, things sort of go at a bit of a slow pace unless you give it a little bit of a kick along. So that has been a bit of a challenge, but I think time will tell. I think we're in a position where, I'd like to see the finished product, see how it all looks, touches and, touch and feel it. But yeah, certainly if I had my time again, it's sort of, yeah, you just want to get a builder that really sort of, number one, sees eye to eye. Maybe I must even build if I can. And interested to hear your thoughts, Justin. Incentives for them to build on time. I've heard that you can maybe say, put into the contract maybe penalties for not delivering on by a certain date. And maybe that would be something that I may consider for future projects.
Oh, it's been really tough the last couple of years. I think incentives can work. I mean, we had damages costs on our last project that are meant to act as the stick.
Mm.
Um, but even they didn't seem to be enough to keep the builder moving along. I mean, our build ended up taking twice as long as it should have. So, which from a damages point of view added up a lot.
So
Um,
can I ask,
build up.
did you was that a recommendation that you received for that particular builder, or you just went out to tender to a couple and like what happened there?
Uh, it was a recommendation. I did go to a couple of builders, including the builder who had done my previous two projects. And they'd done a good job, but I thought these guys could do better. And they were good up until the frame stage, and they were very professional to deal with in the lead up during the tender stage and the discussions and negotiation phase. And they got on site quickly. They got the civil works done quickly, the slab down quickly. They're actually slightly ahead of program right up until the frames started. And then things really, the wheels kind of fell off a little bit there. So I think that's not uncommon over the last few years where
Mm.
you could be dealing with builders who were good prior to all the shortages and price increases, and then they just got caught. Um, Probably potentially it's not through a lot of their own faults, just it was a huge change that happened during the pandemic. So I think
Yeah,
there's a lot of people who have been caught out, consumers and builders. So
yeah,
sometimes, and you probably find this going through projects, your best laid plans can just not work out through no fault of your own. You just have to deal with it, solve
yeah,
the problem.
yeah. And that's property development to a T, right? That's you just got to find a solution. That's yeah, but we certainly seen certainly coming out of COVID, because a lot of the builders, a lot of our clients obviously do sort of maybe single dwelling builds, and yeah, a lot of builders did go under coming out of COVID. They were just overexposed on those fixed price building contracts, and as the cost of materials went up that much, they just could not handle that. So um, I think it meant that there's kind of those sort of small to medium builders, a lot of them sort of really struggled to come out of there. And I also probably over time and with what I've seen with my own clients is sort of builders kind of specialize in sort of things. So if they're really good at a sort of single dwelling and punching that out really quick, then that's kind of their thing. And maybe the other ones are they might be really great at duplexes, and then there might be ones that are better at sort of maybe the 5 to 10 townhouses. And you sort of yeah, you want to sort of see if they have experience in that particular product, because that might sort of give you a bit of insight as to whether they can actually deliver to the standards that you're looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really, really good point that you want to try and find a builder who has a lot of experience in the exact kind of project that you're doing, especially in the early days, because you don't want them learning on your dollar.
Yes.
You want to be learning from them and you want their experience to help get you through the project.
Yep.
So, and just going back to your point before about incentives, I think they can work really well as long as they're very well targeted. You just you want to make sure that the builder's not just pocketing that extra money.
Mm.
It's going to get targeted in a way that's going to ensure that things do get done on time. And
But
I guess,
correctly
and you
as
weigh that
well.
up. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you weigh that up as well in terms of the overall holding costs and all those things. But yes, they can work
Yeah.
quite well because the money talks.
That's it.
Tradies trying to get them on site. So if you really need to get things moving along, then yes, that can work quite well.
Yeah.
But you also need to be careful because I've had clients or people that I've helped who get have been caught out by making extra payments um, that were kind of off books a little bit.
Yeah. Okay.
And when
The
things don't work, when things sort of go off the rails, you get caught out a bit.
yeah becomes a bit murky.
Very, very murky.
Yeah.
So I think in these times, you really want to be working with a quality builder. And if that means paying a little bit extra, I see that as like an insurance premium that you're paying.
Yeah, for sure. I think especially as a property developer, and I mean your course, speaks about all the sort of different um industries, the people that you need in your team. I outline it really, really well. And like all things, if you go budget with those, you will find you'll get found out pretty quickly. So particularly, the builder absolutely falls in that. If you are just going for the cheapest, you might find it ends up being the most expensive option in the end.
Yeah, I think it's a false economy when you're beginning to try and bootstrap. I mean, I know I'm not saying that you shouldn't. I always say try and be frugal.
Yeah,
Don't try and be cheap.
yeah,
So, as you point out, you can get bought out. You really want to try and invest money to the best people that you can afford at the
yeah,
time, because the better the skills, the better the result will be for you. And you lean heavily on their experience and their capabilities.
yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of them. There's a lot of them that you need in your team for sure.
It's crazy how many people you have
Yeah,
helping you along the way, and that they're the direct people. I sometimes love to think about the indirect people involved in your project that you never have any contact with. Like when
yeah,
you go down on site and you see the caulkers
yeah.
or you see the carpet layers,
Yeah, the chippies and yeah, all of it.
yeah, the people who are coming to install vanities, and it's unbelievable how many people indirectly are working on your project. It's actually pretty cool.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, and so when do you think you're going to be finished?
Mate, would have loved to have been finished at the end of this year. Looks like it'll be sort of early next year. Um, but you know what? I sort of a couple things, and again, certainly novice with the whole the whole process. Being my first one. But, I sort of look at it as number one, a lot of learnings from here, so I'm totally okay with that. It's, you don't want to go bust, you don't want to lose money, but if you're learning along the way at the same time, fantastic. That's a really, really great, great outcome. Um, and also, like I said, I think there's the view of, the second that there is an RBA rate cut, I can see a lot of heat coming back into the market. So maybe the timing will be on my side. So by the time it's finished, because I just know from a lending perspective, it's a situation where as soon as there's a rate cut, people can actually borrow more, and
Hmm.
as a result, you're just going to see more people. If they can leverage more, there's more competition at a higher price point, and that effectively pushes up the value of a property.
Yes, well, governments get kicked out when economics get too tough, and they're sort of tough at the moment. So, and there's a federal election due next year. So I would be expecting the Australian federal government to be pulling whatever levers they can to try and make money cheaper so that people feel like their life is a little bit easier.
Yep, for sure.
Um, and then what about your agent? How did you find a local agent to help you?
Yeah, through a recommendation. So again, luckily being in the industry, have a lot of connections that I can sort of lean on and have a chat to. So yeah, someone local in Mornington, they've been great. Helped with that sort of because the marketing campaign for an off the plan is vastly different to obviously a finished product, and I think it's important as a developer that you understand that. And again, I'd describe you have to get things like renders and sort of put it out and get the contract of sale ready now. Um, but again, it's one of those ones where I'd describe it as a bit of a soft launch. Yes, it's advertised, but with the view that we haven't had to immediately sell it for any particular reason. So very happy to hold off until the finished product is there if it means that we can maximize the sale price.
And then is the plan to sell both of them off?
No, looking to maybe keep one, see how much equity we have available, and then maybe roll that into the next project. I think and that's a really good segue. I think um, there's a lot of ways to skin the cat when it comes to the finance. And like I said, sort of seeing the journey of a lot of my clients and the journey that I'm on now, starting off with that sort of duplex aspect of it, there is the idea of it being more of a straightforward residential finance lend, which is one where a lot of people in your community may be, where they have their day job and they want to get that first project under the belt, do it almost like a normal construction home loan, where they can show the bank they're able to hold that particular property long term by receiving the rental income from that particular property. Then once that project is finished, reevaluate, see how much equity they have, see if they want to access that equity, or see if they want to sell down the entire project. I think once you sort of get that, maybe that first or second project under your belt, that's when you start exploring the idea of the true development finance, which is a completely different ball game to a residential home loan. And again, your course outlines it really, really well. Construction home loans talk about they value the property in one line, so it's almost like just a land plus construction equals the value of the property. But when you look at a development finance, you're looking more at GRVs. What's the end value of the project? Um, and then therefore the lender is able to lend on that. But there is also the expectation that that product is fully sold at the end of the project. So you're left with the lender's not exposed, the debt is gone, and then you're left with whatever's left over there. So I've seen that journey many times, and I think that's sort of the way that I'd like to approach it. Sort of start small and then eventually sort of scale up from there.
And so has it been different for you almost being on the client side in terms of the finance structuring of it?
Yeah, it was funny because the time that it can take with some development finance providers is very, very long. So again, specializing in home loans, a bank can turn around a home loan, a traditional home loan in 24, 48 hours. 1 week is totally fine. Get ready because with development finance, it is a lot longer. You get that application in and you might wait weeks. So, get ready for that. Also, a critical difference is the cost. Home loans, construction loans, you're talking rates with something with a six in front of it. Development finance, unless you are a very experienced developer or have a very, very low loan to value ratio, you're probably not going to be dealing with the banks. You're probably going to be dealing with non-banks. And when you deal with non-banks, you're probably looking at a rate of, 9, 10% plus. So again, completely different ball game. Yeah, but very, very interesting to see the other side of it. If I was serving myself, I would have lost a bit of patience because, yeah, those non-banks can really take their time because the reality is from a market perspective, there's just less players in that sort of That market, the home loan market is completely saturated. Every bank wants business, so that's the reason why they can shave down their rates and really have a very short turnaround time. But with those development projects of that sort of, let's call it maybe 2 mil to 5 mil or 2 mil to 10 mil, there are less players in that space. So you just got to prepare yourself to be a little bit more patient as well.
So can I ask whether you managed to get yourself some traditional finance or did you have to go non-bank or more?
Non-banked with this one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just because of the sort of leverage amounts that we've had to go to for this one. Yeah. And again, it's uh, probably a key difference as well is get prepared to fork out the expenses up front with a non-bank. They want that valuation done up front. And you know what? For your own peace of mind, you even though you're paying, a couple of $1,000s to get that valuation, that will certainly serve you because it will make you understand what your feasibility looks like from a lending perspective, and then therefore, what sort of contribution you might need to put in as well.
Yes, that's something that I mentioned in the training that the banks, when you're talking about construction loans, are trying to get as much upfront as they can to help de-risk themselves.
Yeah, certainly. Certainly.
Application fees, assessments, consultants reports,
Yep.
all that
Yep.
stuff.
Yeah, QS, all of it. All of
Yeah.
it.
But as you say, it actually is a good thing to do because it can give you peace of mind that actually your project is solid.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, I've got to tell you, if it's getting knocked back because the valley's there, that it's plain to see. It's one that you should probably say. And what I've learned in development as well is you do have to walk away from some. Ideally, you don't want to walk away at the point where you're doing valuations, but yes, certainly there are a lot of sites, for example, that you might need to explore before you find one that actually the feasibility works for.
So were you doing much looking around before you came across this site, or was it opportunistic with your client who was looking to offload it?
Yeah, I've got to say opportunistic in this instance, but still, because again, it's something that I'm always very curious over. I am always scoping the market and seeing if there are any opportunities there. So when it did come up, even as a skill set, I think that you can learn as a budding property development developer is just be able to do quick back of the napkin feasibilities and see if they work. Because the more that you do of those, the more comfortable you'll get when you get a little bit deeper with a potential opportunity that you do see.
Yeah, it's always your biggest fear when you're starting out, that sort of making that first leap and not, it's what you don't know that gets you into trouble, I think,
Yeah,
when you don't know how to do a quick feasibility. What should you use for construction costs? What are the
yeah,
other on costs going to be that people, if they don't know about, they don't include? So
yeah.
once you get that first project under your belt, you just feel a lot more comfortable being able to do that.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to my point regarding it's okay to start small. Maybe start with that duplex, maybe do it as a residential home loan, construction loan where you're only paying that sort of 6.5%. Generally, builders are going to be able to knock that out within 12 months. Get that under your belt. And the reality is, with a lot of those other non-bank lenders, when it comes to the pure development finance, they will actually ask for your CV as well. They would like to know what history you have in property development. So yeah, start off small, get those wins under your belt, see what those other costs are that you weren't anticipating, and then yeah, build it from there.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the issues that happen on the bigger builds, whether it's a 4 unit project or a 14 unit project, they're actually quite similar to the things that happen on a duplex project. There's more of them.
Yeah.
It's because of the volume of the number of units, but generally the issues are sort of the same.
Yeah, for sure. And also a word of advice, do not fudge the feasibility. Do not any feasibility can work if you say that the end product's going to sell for, this unprecedented number. Make sure that that end number that you're working off is legitimate, that the market is willing to pay that. Because yeah, you do not want to be stuck halfway through a project looking at the numbers thinking, geez, I don't know if this is going to stack up.
I often say that to people. You got to sleep at night. A project's going to run for potentially a couple of years, and you
Yep.
don't want to be with your head on the pillow every night thinking, God, is this actually going to work? I'm not sure
Yeah.
the numbers are right. I think I might have overcooked this one.
Yeah, for sure.
Speaking of that, how did you do your research to confirm or verify your numbers, the
Yeah.
sales figures, and everything else?
Yeah, for sure. So you definitely want to. The great thing about now is there's so much data available and a lot of it free. So, I mean, as a mortgage broker, I've got access to RP data, which is really CoreLogic, which is a really, really great source to be able to find stuff. But, realestate.com, it gives you a window into comparable sales in the last 3 or 6 months. Use that as a starting point. And, don't just use the highest sale point, have a look at a few different types of projects that have been done. Give yourself a bit of a gauge as to where it's sitting. Don't think that you're going to get a suburb record. I think that's a little bit of wishful thinking. Think that you're going to be around that sort of median and use that as your number. And then on top of that, I think maybe it's post-COVID blues, but people love technology and they don't like speaking to people as much. But there are agents out there that you can certainly pick up the phone or take them out for a coffee and ask them what sort of sales they're getting. What does the market want in the local area? Do they want 4 bedrooms? Do they want two car garages? Ask them those questions because that can make a critical difference to the end value of the product.
It's a really good thing to do. And one thing to always keep in mind when you're talking to agents is they actually have very little knowledge about other stock that's on the market. They're very good with stuff that they've listed and sold, but they're generally not that great with other properties.
Yeah,
So you just need to keep in mind that they've kind of got a little narrow view of the market. So you need to speak to a lot of other agents as well
yeah,
to form that broader picture about what the market wants or what it looks like.
yeah.
So
Definitely get a varied opinion. Yeah, they can sometimes have I describe it as a narrow focus, some agents. So yeah, you just want to make sure you get a broad spectrum if possible.
yes. So well, I hope the sales campaign goes well when you're
Thank you.
finished. But I think it's going to be a nice feather in your cap to be a developer and having done some projects and then also being on the finance side. It's going to be a nice way for you to deal with people who are in development and you've got that deep understanding of what's involved delivering the project, not just getting the finance to work.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, going back to your course where it just highlights how multifaceted property development is. Finance is a big part of that because yeah, you've got to leverage. There's just no way that on a $5 or $10 million project that you're able to do that as cash. Or look, most developers are not able to. So you really want to understand that because it really is a big part of that expense feasibility and knowing those numbers. So yeah, I like being able to have those more robust conversations with the developer clients that we now have.
Well, they're just different conversations that you have, can't you? You
Yeah.
just talk with so much more knowledge and understanding about finding a builder or contingency monies and things that can go wrong. Just it's so much better talking to someone who has that deeper understanding.
Yeah.
Um, and development really is a finance game.
Yes.
That's what it all boils down to. It's people and finance
Yeah. Yeah.
in
It's
its most simple form.
yeah, I think what you describe it as there's after all said and done, there's a pot of gold at the end. That's really all it comes down to. Yeah.
And it's how you make the finance work
Yeah,
to make the project happen.
for sure.
Yeah. So, um, what else have you learned about yourself along the way?
Patience. Patience, but you know what? Also, when there is a need, so I'm fairly laid back. But I think also there is in property development a need to also be assertive at certain times. So I will say, hand on heart, no one cares more about your project than you. That is a factual statement. You can have all of these great people in your team, but ultimately they have their own businesses that they run, they do their own thing. You are absolutely the tip of the spear. You need to be the one that keeps moving it forward. So when there are roadblocks, it's on you. It's on no one else but you. So certainly there are times where you do need to be assertive. Um, yeah, for me that's key. Yeah.
Oh, that's a good word. I like that one, being assertive. Yes, there's many times where you have to be assertive.
Yeah.
And there's many times where you have to make a decision where you're not fully informed, where you're
Yeah.
taking bits and pieces of information and you just have to make a call.
Yeah. Judgment call, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And you know what? You live and die by that by the sword. It's you. It's on no one else.
Yeah. And that's a big lesson to understand that it all comes back to you when you're doing a project.
Yeah.
Anything else you've learned?
Communication. Communication is key. I think in property development, there is lots of scope for ambiguity. Things can be open to interpretation. So, for example, the first time you see a fixed price building contract, there are so many lines on there, and they're there for a reason. So, if it is not there, the builder will not give it to you. So, make sure that it's there. If you want it, you need to be ultra clear on there. And then if you want a variation because you think it's the right thing to do, again, you've got to put it in there. Then you've got to understand the cost that's associated with that. Um, that is key, and I think that goes down to your point on the people aspect. There are so many people involved in the project that you must be able to communicate absolutely clearly with all of them.
Ah, yes, the number of conversations that you have throughout a project. It's just mind bending. I think about all the decisions I have made on my last project. It's just there's just so many, small to little. Um, yeah, it's amazing. Amazing how
Yeah,
many little decisions and conversations you have along the way
yeah,
that you then forget about.
yeah, that's right.
Kind of you move on. It's funny, you can feel like you're facing this unbelievable challenge, and then you forget about it. Like you kind of get through it, solve it, and then 6 months later, you can hardly remember that you had to deal with that problem.
Yeah, it just keeps chugging along, right?
Yeah,
It
you just
waits
have
for
to
no
keep,
one.
just got to keep moving along. Um, what would you say is the best piece of advice you've ever received, Mark?
Ooh, that's a good one. If I put it in the context of property development, uh, I'd probably say two things. The first one is a lot of the money is made in the buying, in actually the site acquisition. Um, if you buy well, and I don't want to say time it well because I don't think anyone can certainly time the market, but if you buy at a really good price point, a huge amount of the value that you're able to add is there at that point in time. From there, it's you just got to make sure that you then deliver on the rest of the project. But yeah, it's really about that buying at a great value, great price, and knowing that you've got a site there that you can really add value to.
And then what about your advice, probably directed at someone who might be thinking of or wanting to get into property development, maybe somebody like yourself, 12 months ago, 18 months ago. What's your advice for them about making that step or getting into it?
Yeah, you know what? For me, it's number one, make sure that you surround yourself with a really great team. It is so critical. It is Property development is not a solo game. It is not. It is an absolute team effort. You just happen to be the person or the company that then receives the benefits at the end, but you just need to make sure that you have a fantastic team around you. Um, and also, I think just to expand on that is also don't be afraid to ask for help. I think there's some incredible people in our community that you built, Justin, and I commend you for that. And a lot of other sort of communities out there that they're actually really open and willing to help. So make sure that you do ask them for help. Um, probably the final one that I'd probably say is if there's an opportunity to partner up, team up with other people, other developers, people with experience under their belt, jump at those chances. I think there's a great deal that you can learn, and I'm very big on the idea that you're stronger together. So, if two budding property developers want to they haven't done a project before, but they want to start on one, connect, use our community, and by sharing, dividing and conquer, you'll find that you'll be able to probably achieve it in a much more efficient way than you could have if you did it alone.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. I always say to people, get educated, like learn what you can before you jump in. But the real magic happens when you actually are doing it. That's
Yeah,
when you learn because there's just going to be stuff that comes up that you just can't learn about.
yeah,
And but it could be dumb stuff as well. Like where do you want your general, you know, PowerPoints to go? Where's the sewer line going to come in? Like you
yeah,
just can't cover that stuff in a course. It's just things that happen along the way that you just have to work your way through.
yeah, for
But
sure.
the magic happens when you're involved, and that's when you really learn and you get that experience, and you always have that.
Yeah. What do they call it? Sink or swim. You got to get
Yeah,
in.
yeah, yeah. But partnering up is also a good way of doing it too. I always talk about sharing the risk.
Yeah,
You know, you share the reward, but you're also sharing the risk, which is what I've done on all my projects. Partnered with people or had investors come in, and I like sharing the risk as well as
yeah,
sharing the reward, having
yeah,
people come along with you. But yes, you get to share the risk a little bit, which can make you feel better.
yeah. And sharing the knowledge, right? Because if
Mm.
you partnered up with someone, they may have come across that challenge before. You know what I mean? So let's learn together.
Yeah, that's a really good point because I've invested or I've had partners join with me who are stronger than me in certain things, whether it be finance or other elements of a project. And it's really, or even just general business knowledge that you can
Yep.
then lean on them and ask them for advice and what should we do here? What's your thoughts? And it may not be directly related to development, but it's just that general life and business experience that can be invaluable. And it's just a second set of eyes or a third set of eyes.
Yep, for sure.
Very helpful. So I can't let you go without a finance update. What are you seeing out there in terms of lending, I guess, from a home loan side in terms of people looking to buy new stock, and then also from a development side perspective for construction loans.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So from a home loan perspective, I think the market is sort of chugging along. I think a lot of people are anticipating that there will be rate cuts, that we're at the top of the rate cycle. A lot of banks are coming out with low fixed rates, with a five in front of it. So I think that's a real sign that certainly we are at the peak of the rate cycle. First home buyers have come in a fair bit more, along with investors. There are a fair few investors coming in. I think the investment lending has increased significantly over the last 12 months. So that might be a clue as to the type of product that you should be sort of looking at developing. It is a competitive home loan market. You're going to be finding things, sort of with a five or a six in front of it at this point in time. If it comes to the development finance, again, especially with these early sort of projects, you're probably going to be dealing with the non-bank lenders. And with those, they generally come with sort of that sort of 9-10% rates. They do have an appetite for lending though. So you do want to shop around. What you'll find in the development finance space is a lot of them will have a tranche of funds. And when they have a large amount of it, they can be more flexible. They have a bit more of an appetite to lend. But as they sort of go a little bit lower and they have less funds available, that's when they sort of tighten up a little bit because they've lent all that money. It might be on all these projects that are out there and they're waiting for it to come back in. So just know that the development finance market, I would describe it, it's a lot more fluid, you know. So it's sort of everyone knows CBA, they're sort of just like a rock and they're there and they're great with home loans. But with the development finance side of things, you just want to make sure that you're asking questions because these players, it's a completely different market to the sort of residential home loans.
And then what's your tip for people preparing their development funding applications more than, say, acquisition? And
Preparing, you know what, if I sort of put it with the lens of starting small with the view that maybe, they still have their day job, I would say if you have the ability to have access equity in any residential property that you already have and access it there in a simple manner under a normal home loan, then go to the development finance where you've maxed out your deposit so that you're asking for a lower loan to value ratio. That's going to, in the development lender's eyes, de-risk the project because you might be asking for a 50% LVR. You're getting it at a low cost of funding because your home loan is at a lower rate as well, like we've already spoken about. Then that will sort of put you in the box seat because I always say that, the lower the loan to value ratio across all lending, but particularly with development finance, the more you de-risk the project because, yeah, those finance costs can certainly add up, especially if there are any delays with the project.
yes, I think there's many people out there finding that out, developers, all these additional holding costs, myself included, when there's delays. So, yeah, you want to try and get in and get out as quickly as you can. And as I tell people, banks are in the business of lending money. They actually don't want to have to take over the project and finish it. So they're good at lending money. They want their money back.
Yeah,
They don't want to have to step in and do the project.
yeah,
It's
for
like the
sure.
last thing they absolutely want to do.
They hate it. Yeah, they
Yeah.
do not like that,
Yeah. So anything you can do to de-risk, that's what they like.
for sure.
All right. Well, Mark, been great to talk to you. Where can people find out more about you if they want, or if they want to talk finance with you?
Yeah, I am on my website is simplifyfinance.com.au. That's the website for my mortgage broking business. You can also reach me at mark@simplifyfinance.com.au and also on all the social media platforms as well.
Awesome. Well, Mark, I'm glad that we finally got to do
Yeah,
this podcast. It's been awesome having you as a member of the property developer training, and I'm glad to see the project getting close to finished. It'll be exciting. I'm sure you'll be sharing some photos with us when it's all done, and I'm sure it'll sell well when it's finished.
thank you so much, Justin. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you on the show. See you later.
Take care, mate.
You've been listening to the Property Developer Podcast. Tune in next time for more tips, ideas, and inspiration to take your developing to the next level. For more developing love, make sure to visit propertydeveloperpodcast.com.